The general stood still, staring at the floor like he saw something no one else could. Blood still clung to his boots, dust-covered, sun-worn, unshined for weeks. He didn't blink. Around him, officers argued over strategy, raised voices fighting for control, but the general remained silent. His left hand, hidden behind his back, curled into a fist. And then, without looking up, he gave a command. Just 3 quiet words that no one moved. Except the janitor. He was mopping quietly in the far corner. Wrinkled shirt, loose name tag, rubber, gloves. A man no one saw unless the trash was full. But the second those words were spoken, his eyes lifted, not with confusion, but with recognition. He looked straight at the general and nodded to no one noticed. No one even asked. They should have, because those words weren't part of any standard protocol. They weren't written on any board, not whispered through any radio. They were from a memory no one in the room had, except for 2 people, the general and the man with the mop point 30 years ago. General Howard Morgan wasn't a general. He was just Howie, a radio operator stationed deep in the eastern province of a war no one talks about anymore. That's where he met Cruz. Back then, Cruz wasn't a cleaner. He was a scout. Thin, fast, quiet as wind. The kind of soldier you trusted with your life. Even when you didn't trust the mission, they had survived a massacre together. They'd buried brothers with their bare hands. Dug through ash for dog tags. One night, cornered with no backup, they made a promise. If command ever became blind, if the enemy ever wore a friendly face, they'd signal each other with one phrase: time to wipe clean. It meant one thing: there's a rot inside, and someone has to cleanse it. Now, decades later, the rot had returned, but it wore stars on its shoulders and sat inside air-conditioned offices. It whispered into microphones and smiled during photo ops. The general had known for weeks. He'd been threatened, isolated, ignored. Surveillance followed him even inside his own home. Everyone thought he'd break, speak out, cause a scene, but silence was his armor now. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He didn't warn. He just said it once. Softly, time to wipe clean. And Cruz, now bent, gray-haired, holding nothing more than a mop, understood, while officers bickered. Cruz walked out the back door. No one stopped him. No one cared. He disappeared into a hallway, then into a basement, then into a room few remembered even existed. One that hadn't seen daylight in 20 years. Inside, sealed in a military box marked for contingency only, sat a set of files. Names, coordinates, secure channels, emergency codes no longer used, but not erased. Cruz moved slowly, but his hands did not shake. That evening, across the country, 10 retired veterans received encrypted messages. They didn't call back. They packed bags. One boarded a bus. Another left a church, never to return. A woman in Oklahoma kissed her sleeping grandson goodbye. One questioned the signal, because they, too, had once heard it whispered beside firelight. And they had waited. For years, that night, lights turned off early at the base. Phones went dead. Security cameras blinked. By morning, the false commanders were gone, removed. Silently. No news reports. No press releases, but the silence itself spoke volumes. At roll call. The general stood at attention. Behind him, Cruz, still in janitor's clothes, held a new mop. The officers said nothing. Their eyes lowered when they saw him, because they knew they hadn't been part of the real war. They'd just been sitting in its shadow. You don't need to shout to change history, the general once wrote. You just need to know when to be silent and who's still listening. And Cruz, he never took credit. He just kept cleaning floors. But the hall seemed brighter after that, the silence more peaceful. And once, when a new recruit asked why the general always nodded at the janitor, the old soldier simply said, because not all heroes wear medals. Some carry mops. If this story moved you, tell us where you're watching from. Share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more untold stories of silent heroes.